What's up, everyone? This is the Next Take podcast, episode 66, with Mikel, and
And Tanyka.
where we have conversations on different topics. So we're going to be talking about Mickey Mouse's house at the side of it.
We're going to be talking about the dark side of Disney.
Yeah, basically.
That's what we're doing. And I'm so excited. Guys, you have no idea. So excited. So what?
Well,
Go ahead.
She has all the information on everything. So, go ahead.
Yeah. So for reference, we're going to be doing two parts of this episode. They're going to be spaced out though. So the first part, you're going to be hearing this now. And then the second part of The Dark Side of Disney, you'll be getting on January 30th. So look out for that. So we'll talk about what that episode's going to be like. But this episode, we're going to be talking about the dark side of Disney in terms of the theme parks. The theme park isn't always the happiest place on earth. Sometimes it's real dark. So that's what we're going to be talking about. As Walt Disney himself once said, the House of Mouse is the happiest place on earth. Both Walt Disney World and Disneyland attract millions of fans and tourists of all ages every year with the rise of attractions, Disney characters and princesses, and the flesh and the general magical feeling. This Fantasyland is a bucket list trip, definitely for me, for many travelers and families with children. I don't have children. Come on. Growing up with Disney movies and parents longing for, that feeling of Disney to bring them back. However, if anything and everything is possible at the parks, then that includes things that are a little less savory. Some things are just rumors, urban legends about what goes on within the gates and behind the scenes, but other stories have more truth to them, some of which have been widely covered by the media. The powers that be at Disney have often attempted to, sweep those stories under the rug because nothing bad happens here. But there's nothing quite like hot gossip about the happiest place on earth to help spread the going-ons. And with special social media and the internet, squashing the stories has become even more difficult, despite Disney's top-notch legal and public relations teams. After all, if there really are shady things going on inside theme parks, the public ought to know about that. There are hundreds of stories about people being injured or dying inside Disney's parks. Some of the deaths aren't too surprising. After all, the parks are full of rides and machinery that can easily malfunction, just the same as any other theme park. Similarly, many people have died after undetected health issues are aggravated by thrilling rides. That I think isn't too crazy. But Disney seems to have earned a special spot in people's consciousness, and people love to gossip about someone dying a grisly death in the happiest place on earth. So here, we're going to be talking about some of those not so magical instances. So, of course, not every incident leads to a fatality, although some of the injuries people have sustained at Disney, either as a guest or employee, are quite awful. So we're going to be doing like a general thing here, but I do have some that I break down that we probably will be hearing in this first half as well. So in 1983, an 18-year-old man fell off of Space Mountain and was paralyzed due to that. In September 2000, a 4-year-old boy fell out of the Roger Rabbit's cartoon spin ride and suffered serious internal injuries, cardiac arrest, and brain damage after being dragged underneath the car. Yike.
Yeah.
Although he lived, There was a serious delay between the time of the incident and when medical emergency personnel was contacted, leading Disney to review and change their policies. Unfortunately, it was too late for this child who lived with the consequences of that fateful ride until he passed away in January 2009, probably due to his injuries. Disney's California Adventure has also been the site of several accidents, such as when the California Screamin' attraction malfunctioned and a train rear-ended another, sending 15 guests to hospital. When the going gets rough, though, some people resort to violence against others, and in some cases, the happiest place on earth has been the site of murder. Murder. In 1981, a teenager was fatally stabbed during a knife fight. Like a knife fight, y'all. In 1987, a 15-year-old was shot in the parking lot during what started as a confrontation between rival gang members. What is happening? And soon erupted in violence. In 2012, a young man's body was found near the Mickey and Friends parking structure. Although it was thought that this was a suicide at the time, there were no witnesses to report that he had jumped. In 2013, there were 2 small explosions in trash cans in the Toontown area of the park that caused the park to be evacuated. The cause of the explosion: bottle filled with dry ice, and soon a 22-year-old confessed to detonating the bombs. What is happening? He was sentenced for the misdemeanor of possessing a destructive device. Employees often speak of the atrocious treatment of cast members, which I've definitely heard of at the parks by both guests and higher-ups. A common complaint is about the lack of water and the strict rules imposed on those portraying characters in mascot costumes. Heat stroke is frequent among those cast members who perform mascot suit roles. Others have reported sexual harassment and other forms of abuse, both from guests and their managers. Some guests have also reported altercations with cast members. One woman sued Disney in 1976, claiming that a cast member portraying one of the 3 little pigs in the It's a Small World, after all, we'll be talking about that a little later, attraction sexually harassed her, going so far as to grope her. So the little pig is groping this woman. Disney disproved this by presenting the costume, which had short, inoperable arms that made it impossible for the cast member to grope anyone while in costume. In 1981, a 1978 incident between Winnie the Pooh and a little girl went to court. The little girl's parents claimed that the cast member portraying the lovable bear had slapped their daughter. I'm sorry. I'm just picturing Winnie the Pooh slapping a child.
That's crazy.
It's not funny.
Is it the mascot or is it the animation that slapped it?
It's the mascot. It's Winnie the Pooh slapping this kid. I'm picturing the penguin slapping the other penguin. Okay. Ooh, okay. Let's continue. The cast member argued that the girl had been tugging on the costume, and in the course of turning around. Okay, let me start over. Okay. The cast member argued that the girl had been tugging on the costume, and in the course of turning around, he accidentally knocked her over. Oh, God. He showed up to court in costume, which convinced the jury that the arms on the costume wouldn't have allowed a cast member to slap a child of the victim's height.
So he showed up in court in the costume?
Mm-hmm.
That's funny.
That's funny. In February 2012, the situation was reversed when an employee encountered a 53-year-old man near the Tower of Terror. The man, allegedly drunk, assaulted the employee, who pepper sprayed him. The man continued fighting other guests, had to subdue him. Of course, not all of those stories are simply rumors. Some of the more infamous tales of death in a Disney park are completely true. So in June 1973 and June 1983, so 10 years apart, Some teenagers died in the river of the Americas attraction, both after violating the rules. In the first incident, an 18-year-old and his brother stayed in the park after closing, and the teenager drowned when they attempted to cross the river. 10 years later, a boy stole a rubber emergency raft from a cast-only area of the park. Their park, only to capsize and drown. A year later, in 1984, Dolly Young was riding the Matterhorn bobsleds when her seatbelt was unfastened. Young plummeted to the track below, only to be hit by another car and dragged along the rails before the ride was stopped. More recently, in 2007, a teenager died on the rock and roller coaster at Disneyland Paris. When the ride stopped, her friends noticed she was unconscious. Park medics rushed to the scene and an ambulance was called, but it was too late. Cast members aren't immune to the dangers of the park either. In 1974, an employee named Debbie Stone was crushed to death between a rotating wall and a permanent theater wall in the America Sings attraction. Sadly, some people have died by unaliving themselves or survived an attempt, suing the park afterwards, which is insane, but not unheard of, in the park by jumping out of moving vehicles or otherwise engaging in dangerous behavior. Such was the case in 1994, when a man fell about 20 feet from a Skyway gondola. Just prior to the case going to trial in 1996, the victim admitted that he had purposely leapt out of the gondola. Others, of course, have different reasons for attempting to hurt themselves. In September 1994, a 74-year-old man leapt to his death from a 9th floor balcony in the Disney Hotel. In 1996, a 23-year-old man jumped or fell to his death. In 1998, an employee jumped from the same floor, but survived. 10 years later, in 2008, a 48-year-old man leapt from the 14th floor. In 2010, another person leapt from the Mickey and Friends parking structure. So, yikes. Another grisly tale relates to legends that people take the ashes of their deceased loved ones to the park to be spread. In most cases, the tales say that the deceased either loved Disney or worked for Disney, and so having their ashes spread there was a final request. There has only been one recorded incident wherein a family may have spread ashes. The family approached park staff and requested a private memorial for their loved one in the haunted mansion of all places. I kind of like this family member. Their request was granted, but park staff noted that the family seemed to go beyond memorial and were witnessed spreading a powder around the attraction, which some presumed to be ashes. Others have reported people spreading powdery substances on other rides, such as the Pirates of the Caribbean attraction, and it's rumored that this happens on a fairly frequent basis, so much so that the park maintenance staff now use special vacuum equipment, and park staff have to be trained to handle such situations. There are a host of other secrets that aren't quite as grisly, but are equally as interesting. So Disney has many parks, as we know. So many that one has been abandoned. Before Typhoon Lagoon, Disney had another water park called River County, which has been closed up and left to deteriorate from 2001 to 2015. It's now set to be turned into a hotel, but sat rotting for 14 years. Another rumor that circulated over the years is that there is a jail under Disney World. While that would be fascinating, it's untrue. There is, however, a network of tunnels called utilidors, that's it, because that is short for utility and corridors, that allow cast members and other staff to access different parts of the park and move around without being seen, so as to not break the illusion and take guests out of the immersive Disney experience. A final unsavory fact about the park is how they are rumored to treat employees. We've kind of talked about this earlier. In fact, whisperings that the brainwash their employees are not uncommon. While they likely don't go that far, Disney does apparently tend to go a bit overboard when initiating staff. Culture is top down. Abbreviations like MK for Magic Kingdom are required, and cast members must play the part 100% while on the clock, including always smiling at guests. Water breaks are limited, and employees aren't afforded things like a regular work schedule or fair pay, despite Disney claiming to be family oriented. Many former staff have spilled the tea and shared their experience. Bottom line, Disney is anything but magical for employees. Despite all of these tales of pain, blood, and death, we still flock to Disney. Perhaps the parks get more than their fair share of attention when something goes wrong. After all, death and violence seem downright out of place with the ethos of the happiest place on earth, which tries its best to maintain a squeaky clean image. The fact that it's the site of tragic injuries, violent murders, suicides, and other incidents only makes people more curious about what really goes on behind the scenes. We're fascinated by Disney both because of the delightful and fancy-free image it provides us, the magic it promises us, and precisely because we know that such magic can't really exist, which makes discovering the seedy underbelly of the beast that much more interesting. So freak accidents, we're going to be kind of diving a little more deeper into some of these incidents that we talked about before. So freak accidents do happen, but chances are that the only damage you'll suffer while at Disneyland will be, well, your pocketbook, because yikes, over 650 million people have visited the park since it opened. So we're going to be going through 13 different incidents that happened a little more in detail. And this is where we bring back It's a Small World. This made me laugh immensely. So let's do it. So the first one we're talking about, a disabled man is subjected to 40 minutes of It's a Small World. So on November 27th, 2009, a computer glitch on It's a Small World left a quadriplegic man named Jose Martinez stranded on the ride for 40 minutes. Y'all, he was stuck listening to It's a Small World After All for 40 minutes. Disney was able to immediately evacuate all of the passengers except for Martinez and his wife. Martinez sued Disney for not having proper procedures in place to evacuate people with disabilities. He also claimed that the blaring music exacerbated his medical condition, that's unfortunate, but yeah. Listening to It's a Small World for 40 minutes would likely drive anyone mad. I can't even imagine. After leaving the ride, listen to this. This is what made me laugh. After leaving the ride, Disney employees pushed his wheelchair to a first aid tent where he was subjected to a personal performance of It's a Small World by Mickey Mouse. What the fuck? This poor man was subjected to 40 minutes of it, and then he has to listen to more of it from Mickey Mouse. And in the Mickey Mouse voice? Oh no.
Wow. That's
so funny to me.
Over and over again.
Martinez told reporters that it was like insult to injury. Yeah, I would think so. On March 26, 2013, a jury awarded Martinez $8,000 for enduring the torturous experience, which isn't a lot of money, but anyway. Next, when a tree falls at Disneyland. So, a 20-foot oak tree fell without warning on May 6, 2001, and injured 27 guests and 2 cast members in the process. The incident occurred at Frontierland near a loading dock for one of the Rivers of America rides. When the park rescue team arrived at the scene, just 4 minutes after the accident happened, 5 injured guests were still pinned down by the heavy oak. It took 10 ambulances to transport the 15 injured guests to nearby hospitals. 3 children, ages 2, 3, and 4, were among those requiring medical attention. Investigators think that the 40-year-old tree had been compromised by strong winds in the days preceding the fall. Frontierland remained closed for the day while crews used chainsaws to chop up and remove the fallen tree. Remarkably, all those hurt during the incident suffered only minor injuries. Next, an 8-year-old girl gets hit by a stray bullet at Disneyland. Disneyland is apparently surrounded by several neighborhoods where locals enjoy firing their guns into the air because Florida, y'all. These stray bullets can travel as far as a mile before gravity returns them to the ground. So on February 12th, 1990, one of those stray bullets managed to hit an 8-year-old girl named Nayeli Diana Placencia, I hope I said her name right, while she was riding the Disneyland Railroad. Surgeons were able to remove the medium caliber bullet from Nayeli's lower back, and she was able to make a full recovery. Disney offered to help pay the girl's medical bills despite the fact that the bullet began its journey from outside of the park. Well, this was an unfortunate freak accident a few inches in the wrong direction, and it could have been a very different situation. Yeah. Next, a 6-year-old girl loses most of a finger at Disneyland. So on January 21st, 2001, 6-year-old Priscilla Figueroa was enjoying her day at Disneyland with her grandma. Her trip to the park turned out to be an unforgettable experience for all of the wrong reasons. Priscilla slipped off of a playground while her finger was stuck in the trigger of a toy gun. 2/3 of her left index finger was ripped from her hand. As she fell to the ground. The incident wasn't reported to the Division of Occupational Safety and Health. Apparently, there is a legal loophole that only requires parks to report injuries that occur on moving rides. While Disney wasn't obligated to report the incident, other sources decided to share the information. Disney responded by saying that, quote, everything was operating normally on the island and that the playground would be reopened. Great. Next, accident on Space Mountain injures 9 passengers. So in August 2000, Disneyland Space Mountain roller coaster made a violent emergency stop when a wheel assembly came loose from one of the cars. The initial report suggested that the accident only caused minor injuries to 9 passengers. An Anaheim fire captain claims that the park deliberately concealed the full extent of the accident and the resulting injuries. Other firefighters reportedly heard Disney security officers congratulating themselves for keeping the details off of emergency radios. Pat on the back, y'all. What the hell? A year later, the truth came out. Jonathan Woodcock and his wife, Julie, filed a lawsuit against Disneyland in 2001. Jonathan suffered 13 bulging discs, nerve damage down his spine, broken teeth, and a dislocated jaw. Julie had 2 herniated discs and suffered permanent damage to a hip, knee, and shoulder. State officials said that if the same accident occurred today, there would be a full-blown investigation. Next, Disneyland's first fatality. Disneyland was a perfectly safe amusement park from 1955, when the park opened, until 1964. In May of 1964, their flawless record came to an end when a 15-year-old boy died while riding on the Matterhorn bobsled, which we did talk about briefly before. Like most rides, it's imperative that you keep your arms, legs, and body inside the vehicle at all times. We hear that all the time. The 15-year-old unbuckled his seatbelt just as the ride approached the top of the mountain. While the ride came roaring down the hill, he stood up, lost his balance, was thrown out of the car, and landed on the track below. The accident broke his ribs, caused several internal injuries, and fractured his skull. The boy never regained consciousness, and he died 3 days later. Moral of the story, don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the moral of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And next one. So, don't you dare sneak into Disneyland. So in June 1966, 19-year-old Thomas Guy Cleveland was killed while attempting to sneak into Disneyland. Cleveland managed to climb over the park's 16-foot fence and onto a monorail track leading into the park. The devious plan seemed to be working until a security guard noticed him. To make matters worse, a monorail was also making its way along the track towards Cleveland at 25 miles per hour. The guard shouted at Cleveland to watch out for the approaching monorail. Cleveland jumped and landed on a fiberglass canopy beneath the track. Unfortunately, though, the canopy did not provide enough clearance. The underside of the monorail car struck Cleveland and dragged his body 40 feet down the track. By the time the monorail had made a complete stop his body had been torn to pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, he didn't survive to tell the tale. Next, Roger Rabbit rides seriously injures and eventually kills a young child. On September 22nd, 2000, a 4-year-old named Brandon Sucker suffered injuries that would ultimately result in his death. Brandon fell out of a taxi cab, quote unquote, on Disneyland's Roger Rabbit cartoon spin ride and was folded in half when another vehicle rolled over him. 10 minutes later, when emergency personnel were finally able to free Brandon, he had gone into cardiac arrest and required resuscitation. Brandon suffered serious injuries and irreversible brain damage. He never spoke or walked again. So we did talk about this before, so this is more in detail. After a painful struggle that lasted for years, Brandon ultimately died on January 26, 2009. The State Division of Occupational Safety and Health determined that Disneyland employees failed to properly secure Brandon's lap bar and ordered the park to make safety changes to the ride. Disney settled out of court with the Sucker family, but did not assume legal responsibility for the accident. Next one. Death on Big Fender Mountain. Every now and then, an accident occurs at Disneyland, and the park doesn't blame it on the recklessness of its visitors. This was the case on September 5th, 2003, when a car on the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad partially derailed. The crash killed 22-year-old Marcelo Torres and injured another 10 passengers. Park staff had noticed unusual sounds coming from the train, but no maintenance was done on the broken ride. Are you kidding? It turns out that a mechanic didn't tighten a couple of bolts or attach a safety wire to the wheel assembly. This allowed the train to separate from the track. The state ordered Disneyland to retrain its maintenance workers. A month after the ride was reopened, 2 trains crashed during a test run, and the state ordered Disneyland to retrain its workers again. In a confidential settlement with the Torres family, Disney was forced to admit responsibility for the incident. I would say, yeah. Next one, drowning in the rivers of America, which we did talk about before, but we're going to go more in detail. In June of 1973, an 18-year-old named Bogdan Delaroute and his 10-year-old brother decided to make the most of the Disneyland experience by hiding in the park past closing time. Tom Sawyer Island seemed like a perfect place to avoid detection. After a few extra hours spent roaming the island, they decided it was time to leave. Unfortunately, though, there was no way off the island, and calling for help would have definitely landed them in a heap of trouble. Call for help. The two boys decided to swim across the rivers of America, despite the fact that the younger boy didn't know how to swim. Bogdan decided to carry his brother on his back while he swam to shore. Sadly, though, Bogdan drowned halfway across the river. The 10-year-old managed to stay afloat by dog paddling until a operator was able to come and rescue him. Bogdan's body was found the following morning. Next, death on Christmas Eve at Disneyland. So just a double whammy. So here we go. Christmas Eve, 1998, was a tragic day for Disneyland. As the large Columbia ship was arriving at a dock, an employee jumped from the ship and prematurely secured its rope around a mooring post. The cleat, which was designed to keep the ship motionless at the dock, was not strong enough to stop the moving vessel. As the tethered ship continued to move forward, the metal cleat tore from the ship's hull and was sent tearing towards a crowd. The metal cleat ripped through the employee's ankle, struck Lewin V. Dawson in the back of the head, and hit Dawson's wife in the face. The couple was rushed to the hospital, but Dawson died 2 days later when he was removed from life support. This is reportedly the first accident in Disneyland's history where the park assumed full responsibility. The incident resulted in a settlement worth over $20 million. Yep. So our second to last one, Disneyland's America Sings attraction kills an 18-year-old employee. Disney unveiled the America Sings attraction in the summer of 1974. The seemingly docile attraction featured a rotating theater and singing robot animals, kind of like Chuck E. Cheese. On July 8th, 1974, 9 days after the show opened, an 18-year-old hostess was killed at the end of the 10:30 p.m. show. Exactly what went wrong remains a mystery to this day. Somehow, Deborah Stone got stuck near a moving theater wall, so we did talk about this before too, and was crushed against the stationary wall as the show rotated back to its starting position. Audience members heard Deborah scream, but it was too late. Deborah suffered a gruesome death. Before operators arrived at the scene, this horrible accident was resolved with a small settlement between Disneyland and Deborah's parents. Safety lights were installed and the walls of the theater were redesigned so that they could break away in similar situations. The attraction was officially shut down in 1988. So our last one, the People Mover, becomes the People Killer. Eek. Disneyland's People Mover had a maximum speed of 2 miles per hour. The ride's seemingly harmless speed probably contributed to the fearlessness and carelessness that killed the following passengers. On August 21st, 1967, 17-year-old Ricky Lee Yama was crushed to death while riding on the People Mover. Ricky decided that he would jump in between two of the moving cars just as the ride was entering a tunnel. Sadly, he missed, fell onto the tracks, and was run over by an oncoming train. The ride had to be taken apart to remove his body. On June 7th, 1980, Gerardo Gonzalez decided he would duplicate Yama's fatal stunt. As the People Mover was entering the super speed tunnel, Gonzalez jumped between cars and fell onto the track. The oncoming train crushed Gonzalez beneath its wheels and dragged his body a few hundred feet down the track before coming to a stop. So again, don't do that. But that is the dark side of Disney's theme parks.
So,
again,
part one?
That's part one. Part two will be coming at the end of the month. And that will be a surprise on what we talk about on that episode.
Okay.
That is it.
This ends this episode of the Next Tape Podcast, episode 66. The Next Tape Podcast is available on all podcast platforms. We also have a website called solo.to/Next Tape Podcast. And we're coming out with a new website soon. So stay tuned for that. Where else are we at, Tanika?
We are on Facebook and Instagram at Next Take Podcast and Twitter and TikTok at Next Take Pod.
Okay. So we also have a contact email. Contact us at mikeltanika@gmail.com. That is mikeltanika@gmail.com. So we just talked about the dark side. Actually, Tanika actually talked about the dark side of Disney. So this will be the first part of it. And the second part is coming at the end of the month, Tanika?
End of the month, January 30th.
Okay. Right. So stay tuned for that. And I'm guessing that's about it. Anything else you want to say, Tanika, before we skedaddle?
Just be safe at Disney. Let it be the happiest place ever. Let's be safe.
All right. Okay. So I'm Mikel.
And I'm Tanyka.
We're out until
next week.
Next week? Okay,
next week.
Yes.
We can say next week.
See you guys.
Okay, bye.